In this edition of Fix the Flick, we'll be looking at 2015's The Force Awakens. The first installment of the sequel trilogy was a lot of fun. It had great pacing and a real sense of adventure. There were great practical effects and a real lived-in look. It felt like a Star Wars movie. It felt exactly like a Star Wars movie. And I get that The Force Awakens was trying to tap into a sense of nostalgia, but the plot was pretty much a reboot of A New Hope. And that made the original trilogy feel a little irrelevant. Why should the rebellion have taken down the Empire if we were going to do the exact same stuff all over again? In fact, the only fresh narrative contribution was introducing a stormtrooper as a protagonist. But that wasn't very effective, because aside from some technical knowledge, Finn really didn't contribute that much. And that was because Rey contributed everything.
I need the bonding tape, hurry.
No, the one I'm pointing to.
No, no, no!
She wasn't a very interesting character, because she had no real weaknesses or flaws that stopped her from doing anything. And let's not forget Poe, because the movie certainly did. If they were going to use a familiar story, then they should have at least presented it in a different way. We should have seen the positive effects the original characters had on the galaxy. And because Finn was useless and Rey was flawless, the movie should have made them the same character. By combining the two characters together, the result would have been a main character who was strong but relatable, flawed but interesting. Especially if they were paired with someone who had a complementary personality. So, with that in mind, let's try to fix The Force Awakens. The original text crawl set up the kind of fight that we've already seen, all-powerful bad guys versus scrappy good guys. This version sets up the opposite. It's the Republic that's the benevolent government, and the First Order are a terrorist group trying to bring it down. Now the conflict comes from trying to protect what was established in the past from newcomers trying to destroy it. The movie opens the same way as the original. We're shown a tech trooper amongst other stormtroopers on a dropship. But instead of Jakku, it's Coruscant, and instead of a small village, it's a Republic archive. Kylo force freezes the guard and then effortlessly rips the door's security code out of his mind. The stormtroopers attack the archive, and one of them is killed in front of the tech trooper. While the others barely acknowledge his death, the tech trooper is obviously affected. But before they can recover, they're quickly ordered to slice into the archive database. Eventually, an image of Wedge Antilles is brought up with his location on Jakku. Then a bunch of other files are downloaded and the computers are destroyed. Then Phasma corrals the technicians, and we get the execution scene from the original. And like the original, when the tech trooper doesn't fire, Kylo senses something off about them. After they make their getaway, Poe Dameron bursts into the room with the security team and sees the dead technicians. Poe then leads a squad of X-Wings after them, and when the First Order ship is critically hit, Kylo and the remaining troopers file into the escape pod, while Phasma leads Poe away. Finally, Poe manages to chase Phasma down and takes her prisoner. Then Poe reports to Leia. He asks about Han, and Leia tells him that he left for Takodana on a mission for the Republic. That's right, Han didn't abandon Leia, and they're still together. Leia then tells Poe that the First Order is far more dangerous than everyone was led to believe. In the theatrical version, everyone was worried about finding Luke Skywalker, but we were never really told why. Yeah, Luke is important, but he'd been gone for years at this point. This version lets us know that Kylo Ren's powerful use of the Force is something that the Republic can't deal with, and that they need another Force user to help. Leia then tells Poe that the Republic has formed a resistance group to deal with the First Order's terrorist attacks. Having been a rebellion general herself and knowing how to fight guerrilla tactics, she was called out of retirement to lead it. And Leia wants to recruit Poe as a resistance agent. It's clear he has a deep respect for Leia and all she's done for the Republic, so he jumps at the chance to join. But given the massacre he just witnessed, we think Poe might be more interested in payback rather than serving the Republic. Leia tells him that their first task is to interrogate Phasma. We then cut to the First Order dreadnought, and that's all they have. One ship, not a giant army, one dreadnought that they were able to cobble together in the outer regions. Kylo gives the tech trooper a long, menacing look before demanding the file drive.
Where is it?
After he's gone, the tech trooper yanks off her helmet, and we see RA-2187 have a panic attack. It's clear that Kylo terrifies Rey, and that she's forced to hide it as best she can. We then see Rey cleaning the blood off of her helmet. A fellow trooper asks what she's doing, and she tells him about the other trooper's death. And again, he barely reacts to the news. We see that the stormtroopers are so brainwashed that they're barely people, except for Rey, who has real empathy despite her conditioning. Rey then gets interrupted by an officer telling her to submit her blaster for inspection. Back on Coruscant, Poe's fighting with Leia over using enhanced interrogation methods on Phasma. He argues that the First Order would do the same to them. It's clear Poe sees the First Order as monsters and is willing to treat them as such. Remember, the technicians died on his watch, so he's more than a little angry. But Leia tells him that they have a responsibility to be better, and that every time they compromise, they take a step back towards the Empire. So, Poe reluctantly agrees to questions only. He confronts Phasma on how many innocent people the First Order's killed. Phasma responds that innocents always die in war. So, Poe asks why the First Order would want to start a war with the Republic. Phasma points out that the Republic started the war, that a generation ago they attacked the Galactic Empire, which was lawfully organized under Emperor Palpatine. She angrily declares that the Republic is illegitimate and that the First Order is the rightful successor. The character of Phasma and the actress Gwendolyn Christie were criminally wasted in The Force Awakens. This scene gives both a chance to shine and forces Poe to deal with Phasma's ideological argument rather than just her blindly following orders. In the next room, we see that Leia has been using the Force to probe Phasma's mind during the interrogation. She says that while Phasma was distracted and upset, she was just able to get an image of Wedge Antilles. She tells Poe that the First Order is going after Luke Skywalker. On the Dreadnought, Rey's afraid that if the First Order finds out she disobeyed orders, she'll be sent to reconditioning. So she joins the Jakku mission and blends in with the other stormtroopers. Poe arrives, finding Wedge Antilles' home already burning. He watches from a distance while Kylo takes Wedge prisoner and sends the stormtroopers to look for the map. Kylo says that they intend to take Wedge back to the Dreadnought for interrogation. But he's not calm or cool like he was in the original. In fact, every time Wedge brings up his past, Kylo gets more agitated.
I'll show you the dark side.
Meanwhile, Rey finds the drive containing the map. Finally, Wedge tells Kylo that he cannot deny the truth of who he is. And in a rage, Kylo kills him. In the beginning of the original, Kylo Ren killed a guy to let us know he's evil. Great. But it's a guy we didn't know and didn't really care about. But if that character is a person who's a longtime friend of Luke Skywalker, has appeared in multiple instances of the Star Wars universe, and helped destroy not one but 2 Death Stars, that's a character that we really do care about, making his death that much more powerful. A desperate Poe opens fire on them, which goes about the same way as it did in the original. But this time, after Kylo stops the blaster bolt, Poe runs, and in the confusion, so does Rey. Poe tries to get to his X-Wing, but the stormtroopers destroy it. And as they're about to find him, Rey pulls him into a blind doorway. She offers to show him the way to the TIE fighters, but only if he takes her with him. Having no other options, Poe agrees. While escaping in a stolen TIE fighter, Rey manages to shoot all of the missiles launched at them. And Poe makes a bigger deal out of it than he did in the original, exclaiming that they were nearly impossible shots. After Poe's escape, Hux tells Kylo that RA-2187 could have helped him. This is when Kylo destroys the console with his lightsaber. We're already planting seeds of Kylo's hatred for the main character. I go further into how Rey being a stormtrooper affects their relationship in my previous video. The First Order then puts out a message to their cells in the region to be on the lookout for Poe and Rey. Speaking of which, we cut to her removing the TIE fighter's homing beacon, then turning around to Poe pointing a blaster at her, saying, "Give me one good reason not to shoot you." She says, "I have the map to Luke Skywalker, and I'll give it to you, but only if you take me back to the Republic with you." We see that she's desperate to get away from the First Order, no matter the risk. But he refuses to make a deal with the stormtrooper. Poe's still thinking about the innocent people the First Order's killed, and the thought of working with one disgusts him. So Rey gives the speech Finn gave in the original, about being taken from a family she'll never know and making the decision not to kill for the First Order. Giving this speech now forces Poe to look at her as a person, a courtesy she's never been given. Then she gives Poe the map, saying that she would rather die than go back. For a tense moment, Poe looks at her and finally holsters his weapon. He asks how she knew he wouldn't just shoot her once he had the map. She answers, "Because you asked for a reason not to." They introduce themselves, and Poe's shocked when he hears that she has a number and not a name. So he changes the subject and points out that the short-range TIE fighter can't make it back to Republic space. Poe thinks a minute and says that he knows someone close by who might be able to help. In flight, Poe is brooding over his failure to help Wedge, and Rey sees that the Republic regards human life very differently than the First Order. Eventually they reach Takodana, and Poe meets with Ambassador Solo. That's right, instead of a Han Solo that's portrayed as old and worn out,
your game is old. There's no one in the galaxy left for you to swindle.
In this version, Han is still a fast-talking hustler, but now he's doing it for the Republic. Han Solo has grown up. He's hearing the concerns of some Republic allies about the growing First Order threat. And we see that the new Republic, being only one generation old and not 1,000, is still trying to establish itself. When Poe tells him about the First Order bombing, Han says that he can't just drop what he's doing. But when he mentions that Kylo Ren is after Luke Skywalker, Han immediately starts figuring out how he can leave. Remember, at this point, we still don't know who Kylo Ren really is, so we think Han changes his mind because of Luke. While they're talking, a First Order sympathizer recognizes Rey and calls in their position. So Han and the gang blast their way off the planet with the First Order in hot pursuit. And the Falcon takes a critical hit just before it jumps into hyperspace. Poe, who knows the Falcon, sees that a power relay is about to overload, which will cause a chain reaction in the hyperdrive and destroy the ship. Rey figures out that if they isolate the relay, only it will overload. Yeah, it'll cause some damage, but the Falcon won't blow up. Now, it's not a case of Rey knowing the Falcon better than Han.
Compressor.
It's just a case of her using her skills to help out. This showcases their teamwork rather than Rey can do it all. And for her efforts, Poe is forced to admit that they work pretty well together. Once they're clear, Han asks about Poe's new friend. Poe hesitates and then introduces her as Rey, saying that she helped him get the map and escape. Poe's beginning to regard her, maybe not as a friend, but definitely as an ally. Han asks about the map, and we get the same scene of Han telling them that Luke left after he was betrayed. Meanwhile, Kylo and Hux report to Supreme Leader Plagueis. Yes, Snoke is now just Darth Plagueis, which answers a lot of questions about the Supreme Leader character. Where was he during the original trilogy? He was recovering from wounds that Sidious thought had killed him.
Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep.
How did he reorganize the Imperial Remnant and turn a Skywalker child to the dark side? Because he taught the guy that did it the first time. It didn't take a speech in the middle of the movie to explain his backstory. All it took was one name. So, Kylo and Hux report to Supreme Leader Plagueis. But instead of yet another Death Star, Hux tells Plagueis that they've analyzed the stolen plans, and they have indeed found a weakness. Plagueis tells him to make preparations, and then talks to Kylo. First, he has Kylo take off his helmet. Revealing how young Kylo is now, when he's subservient to Plagueis, really upends what we thought about him. Instead of an unstoppable monster, we see that he's a young man trying to please his master. Then, Plagueis yells at him for losing the map, again. And Kylo is both frustrated and ashamed of his failure. They talk about Han Solo taking the map back to the Resistance, but they stop short of any "Han is your father" talk. Again, hiding this fact sets us up to speculate about who Kylo is. Finally, Plagueis asks about Phasma. Kylo says that there's been no word, but they'll be ready. Everyone arrives on Dakar, and as they head for Leia's command center, Rey notices the soldiers joking around and working together. Everyone seems to be there because they want to be. Very different from the robotic stormtroopers and cold officers of the First Order. Poe asks, "Different from what you're used to?" Rey just nods, and Poe is beginning to consider that she might be more a victim of the First Order than a part of it. So, in this version, Poe, not Han, offers Rey a job with the Resistance. Rey initially gets excited, but then she hesitates. And before she can answer, they reach Leia's command center. Han and Leia reunite, and Poe asks if she's gotten anything else out of Phasma. While the answer is no, Leia says that Phasma was just transferred to the base for further questioning. Poe then presents the map and introduces Rey. Leia congratulates Rey on her bravery for leaving the First Order and bringing them the map. Rey looks conflicted because she doesn't see it as bravery, but rather the opposite. Poe then mentions that he offered her a job with the Resistance, but Rey turns it down, saying that the only reason she did what she did was because she was trying to get away from the First Order. Poe pulls her aside and says that he thought she wanted to fight back against the First Order. He urges her to use her knowledge to help the Resistance. But she says, "I just can't face them again. I'm sorry." Disappointed, Poe says, "Well, I guess you got what you wanted. The First Order will never hurt you again," implying that the First Order is still threatening a lot of other people. He then leaves Rey by herself, and now we get the scene of her finding Luke's lightsaber as well as the Force vision. After she comes to, Leia's waiting for her, and we get the same scene we got with Maz, but with Leia instead. And frankly, Leia having her brother's lightsaber is a lot more believable than some random person at the ass end of the galaxy having it for reasons.
Where'd you get that?
A good question. For another time.
And oh yeah, we have Carrie Fisher. Why didn't they use her as much as they possibly could? So Rey refuses the lightsaber and runs away. While she does, we see Phasma in her cell activate a beacon that was hidden underneath her skin. After Kylo's audience with Plagueis, we get the call to the light scene. Again, Kylo doesn't say grandfather, but we do see that he worships Darth Vader. Knowing how young Kylo is, and seeing that he has doubts about what he's doing, we begin to wonder if he's being manipulated or lied to by Plagueis, which, of course, he is. He's interrupted by an officer that tells him Captain Phasma's beacon has been activated, and Kylo says, "She's found their base at last," and orders the ship to jump to lightspeed immediately. Back on Dakar, Phasma breaks out of her cell, puts her armor back on, and stalks toward the command center, smashing through anyone who gets in her way. The other waste of Phasma's character was that she was supposed to be a great fighter, but we never got to see it. Well, now we do when Phasma blasts her way into the command center and manages to shut down the base's shield generator, just as the First Order arrives. A fierce battle ensues with Poe squaring off against Phasma and Kylo slashing his way through everybody. Rey is paralyzed with fear when she sees Kylo, and the only thing Rey manages to do is hide from him and wait until he leaves. But before he does, Rey hears Kylo mention Coruscant. Han eventually saves an outmatched Poe, and the unprepared Resistance fighters manage to fight off the First Order, but not without heavy losses. In the aftermath, Han tells Leia that he saw Kylo Ren, and then he and Leia talk about the massacre at the New Jedi Temple. But since we're keeping Kylo's identity a secret, the conversation makes it sound like it was Kylo Ren that killed their son Ben. As she returns to the base, Rey sees all the casualties and damage the First Order has caused. All the friendly, positive faces Rey saw on the way in are now injured or dead. It's clear the First Order just struck a big blow to Resistance morale, and it all happened while she was hiding. Throughout the movie, Rey's gotten to know Poe, her very first friend. She's seen firsthand that the Republic values people in a way that she's never seen before. She's seen people coming together as a group to protect something they love. In short, she's seen what the original characters built and how truly special it is. And now she sees the damage these new villains can do to that. So she makes her way back to the command center and tells Leia, Han, and Poe that it's not over. She tells them that the files she downloaded from the archive were for a fusion reactor. And with some brainstorming, they realize that the First Order is going to try an even deadlier attack on Coruscant. As Poe helps load up the Millennium Falcon, Rey volunteers to go with him and Han, saying that she can't just keep running away. Poe smiles and says, "I guess I was right about you after all." Leia and Han say goodbye, and Leia gives Luke's lightsaber to Poe, saying that he might need it. They go to Coruscant, and Rey suddenly points to one of the relay stations and says that that's the one Kylo chose. So they land and start looking. Sure enough, they find the sabotage. Poe and Rey figure out that the First Order set up something very similar to what they fixed on the Millennium Falcon. Only this time, the chain reaction will be big enough to destroy the planet from the inside out. As Rey and Poe work to contain the damage, Poe says that the First Order had to have given themselves time to escape. So Han and Chewie leave to find Kylo. And then we get this scene.
Ben!
But when we finally discover that the murderous, psychotic Kylo Ren is really Ben Solo, it comes as a huge surprise. Now the conversation between Han and Leia about their son takes on a whole new meaning. Finally containing the explosion to just the station they're in, Rey and Poe notice that they're alone and go looking for Han. They find him and Kylo on the catwalk just like in the original. And just like in the original, they react in horror as Kylo kills his father. Chewie shoots Kylo and they chase after him when he retreats. As they catch up to him, the relay finally explodes and rocks the station. Poe tries to fight Kylo, but he's badly wounded. Kylo then reaches for Luke's lightsaber to finish the job. But it flies past him to Rey. Rey has the Force. Now we understand what Kylo sensed in her when she rebelled. We understand why she doesn't think like the other stormtroopers. We understand her compassion and her empathy. And now Kylo sees Rey for the first time since she left the First Order. The living embodiment of the thing that he hates most about himself.
Traitor!
And now Rey must protect her only friend from the thing that she's been terrified of her entire life. They fight, and even though Rey holds her own with the Force, ultimately her inexperience and her fear cost her. In this version, it's Rey who loses the fight, and it's Kylo who slashes Rey's face before the crumbling relay station separates them and forces Kylo to flee. When Chewie arrives, Rey and Poe help each other onto the Falcon, and they escape before the relay station collapses. Even though the Republic took a major hit, the Resistance managed to save a lot of innocent lives, as well as the capital planet of the New Republic. They arrive on Dakar, and Rey goes off with a wounded Poe, while Leia and Chewbacca collapse into each other's arms, grieving the loss of one so important to them both. Sometime later, we get the scene of Rey saying goodbye to Poe. And on the landing pad, Rey and Leia have their goodbye. Leia asks Rey to bring her brother home. And as she leaves in search of Luke Skywalker, we see that after running in fear for most of her life, Rey is finally running towards something. Toward hope. So, that's how I would fix 2015's The Force Awakens. I'd like to know what movie fixes you have in mind. So, email me at the link down below or post a comment. And remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can see more movies get fixed. Until next time, I'm Mr. Fix-It for Fix the Flick.